So welcome to the Salesforce Incubator. That's actually one of the very few events we do in our new location. Some of you maybe visited some of our events on 7 in Townsend at the Roku building. So we moved to this incubator a month ago. So welcome to our new digs. As you can see, we have a very nice view. So we like that. It's a good way for the startups to recharge when they are very tired. So anyway, my name is Ludovic Ulrich. I run a team called Startup Relations here at Salesforce. So we have a program called Salesforce Startup. We have the Salesforce Incubator. Of course, we're here. Many of you probably know about it. And so one of the things we like to do as well is to make sure that we create some sort of center of gravity for everything related to Salesforce here. And we usually do an event open to the public every month. So if you're on the list, you'll probably be invited to the next one. So stay tuned. But again, thanks for coming tonight. I'm pretty excited about the theme tonight of the panel. We try to have a series of events over the summer on AI plus something. As you know, everybody is talking about AI. So today we're talking about AI in sales, which is kind of the bread and butter of Salesforce. So hopefully we'll have a great conversation. I'm very confident about the panelists. So again, thanks for coming. Before we start, we just wanted to say a couple of things. For those of you who are in B2B SaaS, how many of you are founders or actively involved with a startup right now? Raise your hands. Yeah, many of you. So happy to answer any question as well around the App Exchange as the go-to-market, as part of your go-to-market. That's the marketplace. That's where the Salesforce ecosystem resides. So a lot of the startups working in this incubator, eventually we want to help them get to the App Exchange, sell to our customers, et cetera, et cetera. So again, if you want to check that out, have discussion with me, Melanie and my team, Kathy, we're a few Salesforce employees as well in the room. Don't hesitate to ask us questions. When it comes to the incubator, in case, because I had the question before we start, we don't have currently an open application. We actually literally finalized the list of batch 3. So we didn't announce that yet. We're notifying the companies as we speak, but it's very exciting. So the next batch of companies will focus on 3 industries that are very strong for Salesforce: retail, healthcare, financial services. Retail, healthcare, financial services. So if any of you are in those space, the space, you would know if you would be accepted, so probably you're not. But again, check specifically. Okay. Okay, that was a bit nasty. But the good news is we'll do a lot of programming around those themes, around those industries. So you're more than welcome, of course, to come here, and we'll have a lot of interesting content on those themes. Batch 2, that is currently working on the other side of the wall, they've been working hard on AI applied to something, as I said. So we have different ways to play with AI. We had a panel on the AI and diversity. We see a lot of new use cases where you can enable, identifying diversity, or issues with diversity in action in real time through AI. AI and marketing, obviously, is a big topic. But AI and sales is obviously the most represented in the current batch. So we had 13 companies working here. So that was very hard to choose 2. But we have today VoiceOps and Daria, the CEO, as well as Francis from MadKudu, who are amazing panelists and will for sure have good answers and good learnings for you. And I'm also very excited to have Mr. Andy, who is a British man here. So you'll see he's not going to be satisfied with like some generic answers, some generic answers to his questions. So that's why we chose particularly to have Andy be here. And the good news is Andy has been like focused as a founder on, before it was called AI, on a lot of those technologies. And so the idea is to have a great debate on how to basically pitch that to investors. Of course, Andy is today a partner at SoftTech VC, so he has an experience there. But hopefully we'll have a great conversation with those 2 founders of VoiceOps and MadKudu. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Andy. And his panelists.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is a collection of funny accents. So on stage tonight we have introduced by an Alsatian, we have an Englishman, a Frenchman, and a Russian. So, so we're going to be talking about immigration tonight. We thought that AI is done. We're going to talk about how many of us are going to have to leave the country within the next 6 months. What I was interested in, though, is how... We'll have to build a wall and keep you in. I wanted to get like a sense of the audience. So I saw that some of you are founders, some not. How many of you are from the US originally? How many of you are from further flung places? Okay, so we're kind of in the minority. How many of you are on the technical side? And how many on the sales or commercial side? Okay, awesome. So I wanted to kick off tonight and have the two panelists maybe give us 5 minutes on themselves, their company, and their journey that brought them here to the Salesforce Incubator. So Daria, do you want to kick off?
Sure, yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Daria. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of VoiceOps. VoiceOps is a conversation analysis platform for sales and support. What it means is we break down the content of sales calls and then generate insights on phrases that maximize successful outcomes. So our story, let's see. We started about a year and a half ago. Back then the company was called Clover Intelligence, which is a way worse name than VoiceOps. And the way it started was my co-founder Ethan was at this company, General Assembly, which some of you may know. And he was based in New York, and he was doing some ops and engineering work for their sales team. And basically what happened there, and I'm not going to go into too many details, but basically they tried growing the team, and there was an issue around keeping the conversations consistent and actually making sure that salespeople are using the skills that they're supposed to be using, and just having consistency throughout the whole team. And they started looking for a tool that would analyze their conversations and help them improve. And at the time, there was nothing out there that would do that. And so Ethan moved out here and convinced me to join him and to work with him. And we built out the first version that was literally just some analysis in Excel spreadsheets. There was no product, there was no UI, and we somehow convinced some people to pay us money for that. And that's kind of the moment when we realized that if people are paying us money for Excel spreadsheets, there really is a pain point there that we're solving. And yeah, we just kind of started from there. And a few months after that, our third co-founder, Nate, whose background is data science, joined us, which came in pretty handy afterwards when we actually built out the product. And then went through YC, raised some money from Excel, Founders Fund, lowercase, and yeah, now are building out the team.
And then emailed all of the other investors that weren't allowed to get into the round asking for connections.
Yes, we did, and Andrew was one of them.
So I think, as I said to you, I have a ton of respect for like the gall of kind of saying, hey, we didn't take your money, but we'd love to speak to your company. So I think as a founder, you have to do that. Francis, what about you?
So I moved so my scholar background was started in fundamental mathematics, then went into applied mathematics. And I moved to the US in 2010 to join a startup that was doing predictive analytics for retail. And joined actually there my two current co-founders. So we were respectively employees number 37 and 15 at this company. And so we worked with some of the leading brands in retail. So we're working with like Hugo Boss, Vineyard Vines. And the whole idea was figuring out how can you make the retail experience more personalized based on the vast amount of data that you had for around your customers. And so we raised money from like the big VCs, like Sequoia, Mayfield. And so the company's going really well. But we wanted to go back to something smaller and rebuild something from scratch, go back into building algorithms. And what we came to realize was that even though we were a data-driven company helping other companies, we didn't really have data-driven decisions within our organization to figure out which accounts were healthy, which accounts were not, and which leads were actually good leads or not. And so we kind of used that to decide that we wanted to work together and work on figuring out how can you take a lot of this predictive analytics that are very common in B2C and apply them to B2B. We started in marketing and realized that a lot of people are starting to think about predictive analytics in B2B marketing, but no one really figured out how to bring it into sales, and that B2B SaaS companies have a lot of data that's available about their leads, their customers. There's third-party data, first-party data, but no one in sales is really leveraging that for relevance. A lot of people leverage it for personalization, but that personalization is not yet helping relevance, and it's not yet helping people hit the coverage of their financial projections. And so that's kind of what spun the idea of MadKudu, was to see how can we take all of this data that's available for B2 SaaS companies to increase the relevance of every single touch points they have with their customers.
Great. What's when you think about AI, and I'm not talking kind of fancy stats, but real machine learning. Why is that relevant to your business? Why is it important to be an AI company rather than just a software business that's doing something clever with data? Is it important, or is it marketing?
I'll let you take that one.
Is it important or is it marketing? Well, honestly, when we go out and pitch to customers, we actually don't really go out of our way to mention that we're an AI company, because I personally think it's sort of irrelevant to some degree. But, when you're talking to a customer, you're not saying, we're a product with a database, or we have a, graphic interface. Just kind of, it doesn't really matter to them what you're doing under the hood. It's much more about kind of the business use case and the business value that you're providing to them.
Do you have a .ai domain name?
We don't.
Oh, because then it would be implicit.
We don't, and we kind of, we're proud of that. Yeah.
To me, it's very similar to, a couple of years ago, the big thing was big data. Everyone was doing big data. Big data was everywhere, and I think it had similar, it was skewed in a similar manner. You had, big data, usually there's three components to it. People say it's volume, velocity, and variety of data. And anything of those three qualifies for big data. But everyone was talking about big data as big volume. And so the coverage in the media was completely skewed towards Facebook, Google, Amazon. Those companies really have big problems with volume, but very little coverage was around variety of data, which in B2B is actually the biggest problem that companies have. Mm-hmm. They have all these disparate systems that are throwing data. They don't know how to unify it. They don't know how to make sense out of it. And I think AI is similar, where a lot of people and a lot of the press is focused on the issues that Facebook and Google are having, and they require deep learning because they have really huge sets of data. But most B2B companies, what they really need is a way to make sense of very sparse data, and that requires some AI to actually reduce the sparsity of the data, but it's not the deep learning kind of algorithms that everyone is talking about. So I think there's a huge hype in the wrong direction, and essentially we're talking about one component of AI that is not the one that is representative of the biggest issue that AI actually solves.
And do you find that when you're pitching customers, they ask about AI, or is it just, to Daria's point, it's just something that you have? It's just there under the hood with your database and your mid-tier.
So for us, a lot of people talk about it because usually these companies, we sell to bigger companies, and they usually have data scientists, and data scientists or just engineers want to build data science projects because it's exciting to go into R and build some models. But most of the times what happens is that when you actually show them that an AI project starts with getting the data, generating features, running an algorithm, and then presenting that data to some business object to get value out of it, and that the engineers are only focusing on the algorithmic part of it, you realize that actually the core problems are in generating the features from the data you've acquired and then surfacing it in a regular manner to any operational system, and no one wants to take care of that. So it's actually usually very helpful when they bring up the fact that they have some internal AI operations, because then you can actually pinpoint the big issues that they have, and that's what AI companies, I think, solve. But that's not the thing you're going to market because it's not sexy.
And do you ever come across the knuckle-headed buyer on the business side who just gets excited about the idea of AI even though they don't really know how it would apply to their problem?
We do. We do, and it's part of the education, I think, getting them past the hype and just saying, sure, it's great if they're excited about the AI, and then it's deciding on what are metrics that we want to have behind the AI so that we can also sell across the organization and just not to that evangelist who's excited about the hype.
Mm-hmm. And Daria, you mentioned before about the difference in pitching the company to customers versus pitching it to VCs. Maybe you can talk a bit about the importance of AI when actually going out and raising money from venture capital firms.
Yeah, totally different game. Yeah, I think it also, even on the investor side, it also depends on who you talk to, because there are investors who are technical and there are the ones that are not technical. And I think, yeah, for us, we also didn't really emphasize it as much in our raise about, what specific algorithms we're going to use to build our models. Yes, we talked about kind of strategy and how we think about our data and, proprietary access to that. But for us, it's always been much more about, here's a process that currently exists, and it's very manual and inefficient, and it costs a lot of money to a lot of businesses out there, and we're going to make it a lot more efficient. It happens to involve some machine learning there, but kind of the core of the pitch has always been about the value proposition.
Yeah. And Francis, what about you? Was it a big part of the pitch?
I think it was a part of the pitch that was drawn a lot by the investors rather than by us initially. I think from what I've seen and the experience we've had, at least with investors, I think, and I'd like to get your perspective on this, but I feel like investors are still trying to figure out what is the angle for them to evaluate how strong of a moat is AI actually creating. And I think, with Salesforce, I mean, it's no secret that Einstein is definitely going to change the game in the sense that it's just showing how much of a commodity running algorithms is. And just like 10 years from now, every single system will be able to host algorithms that are pretty sophisticated. So that, I think, really changes the way investors are starting to think about, what is this moat that I have? Is it really the technical complexity of running an algorithm, or is it something else? So I think we've pitched a lot around that and actually going upfront against the investor and saying, we know that the AI algorithm component is not our moat, and we're not PhDs writing papers on like, this is the best way to run stochastic gradient descent, but this is the problem that we're solving, as Daria said, and that's important, and that's the value we're creating. So I think it was a good way to move that to the side. But yeah, I'd love to hear how you think about it, and if someone is pitching you, hey, AI, how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a case of trying to cut through the noise. I mean, pretty much every pitch we see has an AI play in there somewhere. If not today, then at some point down the line. I think the way that we think about it is we look for quality of team. So if you believe that a lot of the models and the technology is going to become commoditized in the future, then what you're looking for are a really smart team that can make smart decisions about leveraging the best possible technology and building quickly on top of that. We've seen, and I think we tend to still over-optimize for people that have had deep experience, either on the academic side or in the kind of work experience side of dealing with ML, computer vision, deep learning. But again, it really depends on kind of what they're trying to do. As an investor, the number one lens we have to look through is, okay, great, you're looking at implementing AI, but so what? Does it actually make sense for the kind of business that you're building? When you guys were thinking about kind of building out, maybe kind of working with your initial co-founders, building out the initial team, tell me a little bit about how you thought about that team composition. What were some of the skills, maybe on the AI side or just kind of the broad technical side that you felt were going to be really important to get you to where you needed to be?
I think I can start there. So I think I agree with you in a sense of, and both of you, that algorithms are not what makes companies like ours competitive long term. And because of that, I'm pretty biased because I'm a college dropout, and I think academia is pretty overrated. But, so we definitely aren't looking for PhDs who will come up with kind of novel research problems. And I think at any early stage startup, it's much more about implementing existing research as opposed to coming up with novel research problems. And I think anyone who tries to pitch otherwise, I'd be pretty skeptical of that. And so we are definitely looking more for people who can leverage existing research and existing tools that are out there and to build novel solutions with that.
I think for us it was very similar. The way, like the three co-founders of MadKudu have technical backgrounds. Like our CTO has a master's in applied mathematics and in nuclear physics. And then my CEO has a master's in mathematics from 2 different schools. So like we had kind of the math side of it
because
covered.
One is never enough.
Right. But I think what we found was that when we looked to hire people, we're looking for business acumen, because at the end of the day, it's really about figuring out what is the problem you're trying to solve. Like, the tools are out there to solve them, and it's really about being able to identify a problem, break it down into smaller problems that you know are going to be solvable by the tools that are out there. From my experience, like, the really, really hard thing is just finding the right problem and being able to translate that business problem into some mathematical kind of component. Then the solving of it is super easy, and PhDs are rarely the best at that initial part.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the tools that you found, like tools or products you found that have worked really well? I think maybe even more importantly, some of the stuff that hasn't. You know, with every entrepreneur I talk to, they're always looking for the shortcuts. You know, what are the tips that you can tell me which are going to save me 3 months of spinning my wheels and burning through a ton of money? What worked and didn't work for you?
I think and this is a tip I got from one of the heads of data science at Stitchflix, and they're pretty famous for having a lot of data scientists there. It's never do anything until you started with a logistic regression. Like, really, like, take the simplest approach to any single problem, and that should define your baseline. Like, whenever an engineer starts telling me, oh, I'm going to try random forest, which is not super complicated, it's nope. Where's the baseline? Where's the logistic regression? Let's not start before we've done that. And I think too many projects go into super complicated things because you're trying to throw data into a neural net, and it just doesn't work, and you can't get stability, and like, you run it again, it's completely different results, it's horrible. Whereas you just run a logistic regression, you get 80% of the result, and then you can go to the next step, which is figuring out how do these results actually, create any kind of difference in the business. So that's definitely number one, starting very simple. And the second one is decomposing problems every single time, like, not trying to say, here's my input, here's my final output, let's just throw everything into a neural net and see what happens. Like, really thinking about, if I were to break down this problem, what are the steps I would take? And then building small algorithms for each component.
Yeah, I would. The only thing I would add to that is the times when things didn't work is probably the times when we kind of got overexcited about, just building something before we're super crystal clear on what value that's adding to the users. And I think just technical people tend to,
like, oh, new shiny thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think specifically, I think it's just technical people in general, but also if you work with machine learning or if you work with data before, you kind of, you have a tendency to do that, just to get overexcited about problems. And I think now we've kind of, as a team, we've built up this muscle of, we're not building anything until we are very, very clear on, what that's providing to our users, and then actually pushing out a very, very raw MVP out there. And thankfully our users are very receptive and give us a lot of feedback and help inform our product roadmap that way.
Maybe another one is, don't believe anything you're told at a data conference. Like, literally, that is the worst thing ever. You have people tell you, oh yeah, we implemented Spark ML and it ran amazingly, and then you realize that to have it work, you need like 10 ops people to set up Mesos and Zookeeper and all this stuff, and it's like, it just takes hours and hours. And when you go to a data conference, everyone is telling you about, like, oh, this new tech works really great for this problem, but you don't realize the amount of effort that's been put initially in there. So for me, again, it goes back to, if you're not able to tell me why this technology is better than the really basics, then I don't believe you. It's great, but it doesn't work.
It's like the technology equivalent of going to a meetup and every CEO, they're absolutely killing it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, things are awesome. Double-digit growth.
Especially in the US. Everything is awesome.
Everything is. Yeah, I saw a great thing on Facebook a couple of days ago, which was the distribution of emotions. And kind of, the normalized distribution kind of looks like that, where it's kind of crappy, it's fine, things are good, great, awesome. The American distribution is like 90% is awesome. And the Eastern European distribution is like 70% is like, 10% is like, it's fine, and 20% is like, I guess it's okay.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. With AI being super hot right now, you guys are not the only companies in town doing what you're doing. And certainly when you're hiring, there are a million opportunities for great engineers to go and build great things. How do you cut through the noise? How do you build I guess on one side, a really compelling proposition for the people you want to hire, and on the other side, a really compelling proposition for who you're trying to sell to when there is a universe of products and a universe of companies out there?
I can start. I think for us, we do try to make a big deal out of, I mean, this is going to sound really simple, but putting the user's needs first, as opposed to being overly excited about a technical challenge that you're working on just for the sake of a technical challenge. And I think that's it's both a filtering mechanism for when you're hiring engineers, because there are a lot of people out there who just want to work on cool tech. And that's not a great fit for our stage or our team. And it's also it makes it crystal clear what we're looking for as well. And I think that's helped us a lot with that.
Yeah, I think it's, for us, I would say it's being genuine. I think we cannot market against Salesforce or IBM with Watson, and they're just throwing so much PR out there around what you can do with AI that there's no way you can get higher than them in terms of the SEO or whatever. So I think the best way to win is to have customers talk about their successes. Nothing is better than having a customer say good things about the business value you're creating, regardless of how you actually created it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to maybe ask you to give away the keys to the kingdom a little bit in terms of some tricks of building a team. In the audience, how many of you are actively hiring for engineers today? Okay, so a couple. And of those of you that are hiring, how many of you have your teams here in the Bay Area versus somewhere else in the world that's infinitely cheaper?
That's a loaded question.
What do you both do? Are you 100% Bay Area? Do you have people elsewhere?
We actually are all here. Yeah.
And are you recruiting from the rest of the world and bringing them over, or are you recruiting people that are already here?
I guess so far we've only had people who are from the U.S. or have lived in the U.S. Before they joined us. But yeah, it's not like we're against it. Mm-hmm. It's not like we're actively trying to avoid people who are living elsewhere. It's just the rest of the team is here right now. We
have a history of hiring people from France.
Oh, very French.
Yeah, very French. Yeah, I mean, it's hard in the Bay Area. It's a very competitive scene, and it goes back to this thing of hype. There's so much hype around great companies that have amazing culture because they have a lot of backing from VCs that they can spend in, hot tubs and God knows what they have.
T-shirts and lunches for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So we found pools of engineers in Europe actually are very talented, and it can then become a competitive advantage to be in the US because you're giving them the possibility to come over to, get a chance to be in the Silicon Valley, and that's been a very compelling differentiator for us.
Yeah, one of our portfolio companies, Front, which is French founders, I guess they're kind of French famous. Yeah. They, for a very long time, they would hire great people out of French technical universities, French companies there, bring them over on the French visa, and then kind of keep them in the US. And I think they realized that that's great in the early stages, but then at some point you really have to kind of build out your bench strength of kind of locally sourced talent.
Algolia is another great example of doing that, where they have the entire engineering team and the CTO in Europe, and then the entire marketing and sales team is in the Bay Area.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a model that I really like. I think about some of the very best companies I've been fortunate to invest in over the years. Companies like Intercom, Pipedrive, they've always had an engineering center in another country, and it could be Ireland, it could be Estonia. And the price leverage you get on hiring great people there, and the longevity and the fact you don't need to ply them with lunches and massages and T-shirts is kind of incredible. We have a company in our portfolio that have R&D based in Barcelona, and they have, as of today, 31 people based out there. More than half of them have PhDs in computer science or in biotechnology, and which is kind of very relevant to what they do. And they spend, I think their burn is less than $150,000 a year, which I think in the US would buy you 3 engineers and a couple of T-shirts.
Pretty much.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, 150K a month.
Yes.
Yeah, not quite that cheap. That would be incredible. So moving on. And now we're going to kind of attack the topic of the evening, which is sales and AI. Do you feel that salespeople, marketing people, commercial people should be afraid of artificial intelligence? Or will it make their lives easier?
I think there's one part which is AI is, there's no way around it. It's going to happen. So I think if you're scared of change, then you should be scared of it because that change is coming, and you can either choose to adopt it or be left behind. I think the interesting component there is also that I think we glorify AI a lot, but a lot of the AI today is automation. And if you think of the first components of automation, like email sequencing, tools like Outreach, TalentApp, all of that, that's the most basic form of AI. Just keep on sending emails until there is a response. It's a very binary thing, but it already is some form of AI where you're automating a low leverage component of your day-to-day. So I think there's kind of going beyond the emotional part of dealing with change. I think it should be embraced because mainly the goal of it is to make people better.
Yeah, I think honestly it's a little out of the proportion, and it's like saying, are people scared of using a system of record or a dialer system, or were people scared of a calculator? I think the only reason that these tools exist is to help make their lives easier and more effective. And the parts that are getting automated are not parts that what salespeople are best at, but it's parts that are either very manual or very time-consuming or very expensive. And in our case, for example, it is call shadowing, listening to call recordings, call analysis, and that's not something that, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but it's not something that most managers out there are looking forward to doing every day. They want to actually focus on coaching and being out there with their teams, and that part isn't going away.
I think that's it's an easy argument to make when A, you're selling the software, and B, you're selling to other startups. Have you had any pushback when you've been selling to more traditional businesses where the managers are thinking, we're operating in a place that isn't Silicon Valley, where there are a finite number of jobs, and if we are making salespeople redundant through automation, then we have no idea what else they're going to do. Maybe that doesn't affect you guys yet, but it probably is going to be on the mind of some of your future buyers.
So we actually don't sell to startups as much, and most of our customers are kind of not your typical technology Silicon Valley companies, and honestly we haven't had that kind of pushback, but I think it's probably because one is we don't position ourselves as we're an AI company, we're coming for your jobs. We are positioning it as we're going to help your team to be more effective through automating parts of the analysis that you now either are doing yourself or you have a QA team that does it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. To your point, I think it is true that automation, AI is like some form of automation. I think at the end of the day, automation will reduce the need for the kind of low leverage effort that is being automated. So for sure, if 90% of what you're doing is this low leverage automatable task, then you should be afraid of not being able to do that because it's going to be replaced by some piece of software or a machine. And I think then that's why it's very important to embrace it and to accept the fact that it is going to happen, to be able to be ahead of the curve and really embrace that transformation.
And on that, what are some of the blockers to adoption of sales AI you've seen in some of the different market segments that you've been selling into? I think this was your question, Francis, so I hope you have a really good answer for it.
Absolutely. I think what you mentioned, right? The first one, of course, the main blocker is the fact that there's people are afraid of change, and I think to me, what I've seen as the biggest blocker is the fact that, again, AI is just a way of doing something. But the really hard part is to operationally embed any kind of new AI in a process. And having operators that can understand how to embed operationally this AI component to make the processes better is definitely hard, and there's few people out there today that have those skills and are able to have that vision of how to change the process. And it means that there's an educational component that goes beyond just educating the champion, but goes into educating the operator to make sure that not only do you buy the vision, you also understand how you're going to implement it and get value from it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, yeah, we do get, you know, some pushback in terms of, you know, I'm skeptical of whether this works, or, you know, it's kind of it's a novel, you know, segment of the market. People haven't really seen as many tools like ours. And yeah, I agree. We also have to do quite a bit of customer education in terms of, you know, what it does and how to use it and how to empower everyone in the team to use it.
Maybe one thing I just realized that it would be interesting also to hear how that works for you is, it was like this famous quote from George Box, which is like, all models are wrong, but the true question is how wrong do they have to be helpful. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things dealing with salespeople, especially when you're building a model that's doing some prediction, is whenever it's wrong, people are like, haha, yeah. The machine is wrong. Like, I knew it. I'm better. And I think it's getting people to understand that, sure, it's going to be wrong, but the idea is that it has to be directionally accurate and it has to be improving the overall metrics and not necessarily every single point. I mean, if you've done any math, you know that when you're doing a regression, there's always going to be a distance between the points you're doing the regression against. And I think that component is very, very hard to get people to understand. I'd love to hear for you guys when like something is not exactly as accurate as someone would believe, how that happens to...
Yeah, no, it was definitely kind of a learning moment for us where now we just got a lot better at setting expectations from the start that, you know, when we first show something to them or first batch of analysis or a demo, you know, we set the expectations are, you know, we're not going to completely change the behavior of your team forever with just one set of data. You know, for the first set of data, we're just going to show that it works, that there are some insights that are going to be helpful to you, and then over time, you know, we can work towards higher accuracy and more kind of tuning it towards your team. Yeah.
Great. So one more question for you guys, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. Living here in San Francisco, you know, hanging out with other startups, going to probably maybe YC Demo Day. What are some of the other areas that you're excited about where you've seen AI, ML, computer vision, deep learning applied in the areas of work or automation or industry that you think are super cool? Maybe that if you weren't doing what you're doing now, you'd be kind of interested to work on those.
Do you have an answer?
I have kind of an answer.
Is it just MadKudu? That's it?
Yeah, of course. I think maybe a more generic answer, but I think one component I really like to think about is how AI can actually make human connections better. And one of the things that I've been thinking about and is how do you, if you were, for example, able to take a combination of VoiceOps and other things where you're constantly listening to how people interact within a company, like being able to predict what your tone is going to imply and what kind of impact it can have on the people who are listening, and even being able to analyze a conversation that you're having internally and understand that maybe the fact that you cut someone when they're speaking is making you seem aggressive, and like being able essentially to coach humans by using the data that you're able to gather around that. I think that's a really interesting application of how can we use all of this data and this AI to actually make us better people and actually make our interactions between humans better.
Maybe kind of integrate it with Siri on your iPhone, like, Francis, chill the heck out.
Exactly.
You're freaking people out.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
I think, yeah, the coaching aspect is really important. Like, I think, like, Fitbit is nice, but I don't like the fact that, like, all these things where you have to go and look at it, there's no real sense of coaching. I think we need to go to the next step of figuring out how can we help people be, better at interacting with one another.
Honestly, I don't know if I have an answer to this one. I kind of haven't really thought about stuff outside of sales for a while. But what I was doing before VoiceOps is I was at Coinbase working on their fraud prevention. And basically what we did there is, you have user A who has a driver's license from California that looks somewhat legitimate, so we're going to assign their purchase limits to $5,000 a day. We have user B who has a type of bank account that's more associated with fraud, and their IPs in the Philippines, so we're going to set it to $20 a day. Just things like that. Just the way that that's traditionally done is with hard rules and manual review. And when you have manual review, it's people looking for patterns. There's really no certainty, even when you see a driver's license. And I think those types of things are what computers are really, really good at, is recognizing patterns. And I think any type of fraud prevention or even spam prevention are a pretty exciting area for automation.
Awesome. So, questions from the audience? Just back there. So we'll do guy back in the leather jacket and then chap in the suit jacket.
Hi. From a product design perspective, I'm very interested in the issue of how to build trust with an AI agent. So I'm interested in some of the questions that you may be getting from some of your customers around the trust that they're building with your product, A, around usage, and B, around purchasing.
Can you clarify around usage and purchasing?
Sure. So have you found any difficulty around the black box issue of AI and deep learning, and customers that are asking, we don't have a level of confidence in how your algorithm is making decisions for usage, and also with purchasing, sometimes consumers, with self-driving cars, for example, might be unwilling to put their life on the line of an algorithm. So yeah, okay. Anything you have on those two would be great.
I can start on that one. I think it's what we've seen is that there's multiple components in the adoption of AI products, at least in sales, and we're again in B2B SaaS. What we see is that when we're selling the product, when we're still in this phase of convincing people that the AI product can perform well, they're more concerned about the performance and showing me gain curve, show me that you're actually able to predict better than my gut feeling. But then when you go into the operations, they're more concerned about the false positives and the false negatives. So you go from thinking about things at an aggregate statistical level to going into very isolated case-by-case analysis. So those are two very separate kind of optimization functions you want to have, if you will, because one of them is really at a high level aggregate, are you predicting well? The other one is, how do I explain false positives or false negatives? And one thing that we've done in the product is that we now, whenever we build a model, we have a prediction model, which is optimized towards minimizing the error function. And we have another model, which is geared towards, it's an explanatory model. So it's not going to be as accurate, but it's really looking for what are the main factors that explain my prediction, so that we can actually surface that. And that came from the fact that we were making predictions, and the sales team was wondering, but why are you telling me this? And now we're surfacing these data points to explain why the prediction was made.
I think for us, the issue of trust is really around trusting our insights. And I think part of it is what we talked about, where, when they see an insight that's incorrectly labeled or incorrectly represented, I think there are two ways that we're working around that. And one is setting expectations, just in terms of what we can do, what we can't do with various levels, various amounts of data. So when we're first starting out, we need just more data than people are usually willing to provide at from scratch. And the second part is just around customer education. Just over time, we've learned to take it a lot more seriously. Thankfully, we have a pretty high touch model, so we do get a lot of time with our customers. And so just training them and explaining what our tool does, I think that's helped a lot.
For the VoiceOps, so what percentage of what you build for customer A is transferable to customer B? I mean, are you starting from scratch and building an entirely different set of models for customer B, or are there like universal rights and wrongs in analyzing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty transferable, and part of it is because we now have a much better idea of the types of customers that we're going after. And when we first start out, we usually measure what we call core skills. So it's skills that are pretty universal to any sales team, really. It's number of benefits that the rep's mentioning, number of technical features or features of their product, or do they have any closing language? If there is any upsell, cross-sell element, measure that. And so those types of insights already usually provide a lot of value, from scratch, because this type of data people didn't have before. And then over time, if there are specific features that the company is interested in, for example, we have a bunch of people who are interested in promotions or discount codes and how that affects their close rate. So then over time, it gets much more customized.
B2C or B2B mainly?
Mainly B2B.
Cool. Okay, I think with that we are.
I think we're done. I really want to thank the panel. I saw your faces. It was entertaining, so we try to do that on purpose. So thanks again for your time and trying to make it pretty informal. I have three things to add, and please feel free to interrupt me. One, there's more food. In case you wondered, we just put a little teaser, but there's a lot of good food out there. So stay, network, and talk to each other. So that was number one. Number two, when it comes to Salesforce, if I may, no, just to give a point of view, and it's not to control anything there, but there's three things to know. One is we're making all our products more smarter, more intelligent by a lot of through a lot of acquisition. We actually acquired a lot of companies were very focused on the IP of AI almost for the sake of it. So very different from the companies you see here. They're building technology that we're applying to our products, and that's also called Einstein. But there's also a lot of technology we want to make available to developers. So again, we can talk about this, and that's some of the technology that MadKudu and VoiceOps and the others. I see Hilo, I see cloud conversion, CRM science. They are using through the Incubator program. And then last but not least, for those of you who are more, and we came to the event because you're more, and sorry to say that, but geeky about AI, there's also Salesforce research. And so there's a lot of state-of-the-art AI that we're actually putting out there, mostly open source at the moment. So you can check it out. I don't have the link there, but check it out if you're interested. So that's another way to engage with us on the AI theme. And I know we didn't touch on this because the whole idea was to apply AI. And the last thing is, of course, we're very proud of those companies, right? So thanks so much for what you mentioned. I mean, I was on a customer call recently with VoiceOps and MadKudu. I spent too much time with those guys. They're awesome. So, but we're really proud of this batch 2. So if you want to see more, because I know usually what happens for those events is like, okay, great, sounds interesting. I'd love to see the product in action. So of course you can talk to those founders and get a demo set up. But on September 27, we'll do what we call the product reveal. So it's not a demo day. We're not like YC, Techstars, and other programs here. It's more of an incubator program. So those companies will show what they built over the last 5 months. So September 27, it's a Wednesday. You will get the invite because we are here today. Another way to stay tuned is to follow us on Facebook, tell your friends. So please come back. You'll get not only those folks on the stage, but they'll do some great entertaining demos. So again, thanks for coming. Thanks, Andy, for being such a great moderator. Francis, Daria, thanks again. Have food and booze.